Hello and welcome to our CIMA P3 Performance Strategy Lecture 5 recap. This lecture is the second of our lecture on internal controls, and we're continuing to look at different cycles within our management control systems to look at control objectives and control procedures. The next cycle to look at then is the purchases cycle. We've already looked at the sales cycle. And the first step on our purchases cycle is to place the order. Control objectives at this point. We want to make sure that we have a valid requisition. We want to make sure that there's a reasonable cost. We want to make sure that the requisition is only made when it's required, and that there's an order raised for all requisitions, that there aren't requisitions being sent up and no order being raised for them. Procedures to ensure this happens then. We want to get authorization of the requisition. We'll probably centralize our purchasing to make the procedure more structured. We only use approved suppliers. Check the inventory to make sure that we do need the goods. Have sequentially numbered requisitions to make sure none get left out. And ensure that we get written confirmation from the order manager. Next step then is when the goods are received. The objectives here are that we get all the goods for all the orders that we make, that they're the correct goods, and that the quality we get is sufficient. Procedures to ensure this then. We want to make sure that deliveries are made to a secure area. We want to quickly update the records to make sure that nothing gets left out. We'll sequentially number the purchase orders and then match them to the goods received note when we get it. And we'll inspect the goods to ensure that the quality is there when we get them. Next step in the process then is to receive an invoice from our suppliers. Our control objectives will be that we're invoiced for all goods, that all the invoices we receive are valid invoices, that we get the correct items and the correct quantities, and that all the calculations are correct on the invoice, that they're not overcharging us or calculating the VAT wrong, something like that. Procedures to ensure this happens. We're going to match our invoices to goods received notes. We're going to check all items, and we're going to check all invoices and make sure that they get authorized. That brings us on then to recording the purchase. Our objectives here, we want to make sure that the correct amount is recorded. We want to make sure that everything is recorded. We want to make sure that they're allocated to the correct supplier. And to do this, we're going to check all the invoices and stamp them when paid. When it's stamped, it then gets filed. We want to reconcile the supplier statements regularly to make sure that they think we owe them the same that we do. And we want to reconcile the purchase ledger control account, which will get us comfort over the balances in there. Bringing us on then to paying our supplier. The objectives here are that all invoices are paid, that they're paid on time, that they're only paid once, that we're not multiply paying invoices, and that the amount is valid and correct. Procedures to ensure this then. Again, we want to make sure that the invoice is stamped as paid. We want to implement a system to make sure that all invoices are paid on time. Once it's stamped, it must be filed away so that it doesn't get stamped or paid again. You're going to vouch all payments to invoices, and very important, you're going to ensure authorization from the purchases manager. So that's the purchases cycle, control objectives and control procedures. Another cycle to look at then is the payroll cycle. First step in this is that your timesheets or your cards are submitted. The objectives at this point are that all the cards or sheets are received, that they're all valid, and that all the hours on them were actually worked. Procedures to ensure these things: count your employees and your sheets and make sure they tally up. Restrict the access to additional sheets, and make sure that all sheets are authorised by the line manager so that all hours worked are verified. Nextly then, we're going to record the information. This will usually be on a computer system. The objectives here are that we don't miss any of the information, that all the information is accurate, that no information is recorded twice, and that we have no bogus employees recorded. Procedures to ensure this: check all your totals, sign the sheets once they're put onto the system. You've got to have passwords and usernames on the system to make sure that it's not abused. You want to make sure that only a senior manager can set up employees, and you want to have segregation of duties. The next step in our payroll cycle is controls over the standing data. So objectives here are that when people leave, that the payments stop, and that the data on the system is accurate. Procedures to ensure this will be ensuring that there's prompt information given to the payroll clerk on leavers and joiners. Management will then check the standing data to make sure it conforms to what they believe it should be, and any changes to standing data will be authorised by management. So processing the payroll then. The objectives in this are that all the calculations are correct and all the calculations are recorded. Procedures to ensure this: print out the sample and check it is the easiest one. Your system may produce exception reports if there's a problem, so do print them and ensure that they're followed up. The printout should be signed by the clerk, and the management should then review it. Last step in the payroll cycle then is to actually make the payment to employees. So objectives here are that of course all staff have to be paid, that there's no bogus employees being set up on the system, and that the correct amounts are being paid. Procedures to do this: well, if you're making cash payments to employees, make sure that there's two managers there to oversee it. And have a look at the BACS summary and the BACS listing to make sure it conforms to all the employees that you have. Okay, so those are the internal control cycles for purchases and for payroll.